Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Convoluzier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Security. Today's webinar features Silver Viper Minerals, which is a Canadian-based junior mineral exploration company focused on precious metal exploration in Sonora, Mexico. It has 100% interest in the La Virgina gold-silver project and has an option to acquire 100% interest in the Rubi Esperanza group of claims internal to those concessions. Today, I have with me on the webinar Steve Corp, who's the President and Chief Executive Officer at Silver Viper. Great to have you here, Steve.
Great to be here, Taylor. Thanks for doing this again.
Yep. So the format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Steve will provide an update on Silver Viper. And then in the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please send us your questions using the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. And you can type them in at any point throughout the presentation. So to start, I'll handle the disclosures, and then I'll let Steve get into the presentation. So for Silver Viper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Silver Viper corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Silver Viper specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Steve to update you on Silver Viper and what you have to look forward to with the company.
Perfect. Thanks, Taylor, for that intro. And yeah, thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to get an update on the Silver Viper story or hear it for the first time. It's a very good, it's a fantastic exploration asset, and I'm sure everyone is on this call has been feeling the pain of this sector and where we're at, but this project really does set itself apart from a lot of our peer groups and other projects and mines in Sonora and Mexico. So, we'll dive in. I'll try and go through it fairly quickly, and then hopefully, we have a lot of questions and can chat and get it down to what people are wondering. Like Taylor said, the forward-looking statements, which I'm sure I'll make a ton today. So just draw your attention to that slide. Silver Viper sits within a group called the Belcara Management Group. We have 3 public companies under our group's management. Barcele Minerals, which is a joint venture with Agnico Eagle, Silver Viper, and Orex Minerals, which has JVs with Pan American and Fresnillo. This is a group with a long history of success. The last big kind of win for the group was Orco Silver Corp, which we sold in the bidding war between Coeur and First Majestic in 2012. But again, that's kind of the group's model, is what you saw at Orco Silver. We get involved with the project at the very early stages. We'll take it as far as a feasibility study and then look to vend off to one of the major mining companies. We only get involved with projects that we see that have the potential that would be of interest to those major miners. So for us, we want to see a minimum potential of 1 million ounces of gold or 100 million ounces of silver. In the case of Orco Silver, we put in the first drill hole and grew the project to 270 million ounces of silver. So that's really our model. We have a very strong geological team within our group. Because we have that set up and we share our G&A costs across the 3 companies, we're a bit different than some of the other groups that really everyone who works for the company has eyes on every project within the group. So even though, Art's only a director on this, he takes the lead on Barcele. Ben is, heads up Orex, but he's evaluating the assets and looking at the assets constantly on this one. The accounting department, everyone works together, and I think it really does differentiate us and lets us save money, on our G&A costs and everything else. Here's the updated capital structure as we stand right now. Again, this has been a long down correction, particularly nasty market this last, year, 2 years. It creates an opportunity. I never thought we'd be back or ever get to these share prices, especially with the success we've had as a company. But again, it's the market we're in. It's not us. It's, you'd hear it from every presentation that you give right now, is that all of our peers are hurting. There's not a lot of capital out there, not a lot of investment from the funds. The funds that we have had have been, they've been holding their positions and been great partners on that front. We've had a lot of success on retail, both in Canada and the US and around the world, but and we've had our partnership with Red Cloud, and as you can see, Taylor, has his target that's significantly higher than where we're at today. I think we're almost out of this market. We can talk more at the end if people want to dive into my thoughts on silver and gold and what's going to trigger everything, but it just feels like we're getting to the end of these interest rate hikes. We saw what the market did in January when the expectation was that there wasn't going to be any more rate hikes, and so I really do think that this market is about to take off, and right now we just need to be patient. Right now, the company has one single asset in it, the La Virginia project. This was Minefinder's #1 exploration project when they were bought by Pan American Silver. They spent a lot of time drilling one particular area of the project. We got involved because we saw, that most of this massive land package had never been even sampled, mapped, had no work done on it. And when we did our site visits, we saw one area in particular, now Rubi, that sits 4 to 5 kilometers north of where that historic work was done. And we said there's going to be new discoveries made on this, and this is our first exploration target we're going to hit. We made a new discovery there, and since then that's been our main area of focus with all of our drilling. That particular area is what really makes the project special and stand out, as far as starting as an open pit heap leach operation and then expanding into an underground deposit after that, like a lot of the other mines in the area. But again, we'll go through it, but you'll see, we're operating, our average grade is double to triple what the average operating, grade is at those mines in the state of Sonora and heap leach operations. So again, we've got off to a great start. We've got lots of room to expand the resource. Still planning a resource update, in the first half of next year, that I think will take us over that min threshold that we're talking of, potentially 1 million ounces of gold equivalent, or maybe you can get us to that 100 million silver as well. So we'll see. A lot of that will be based on drilling success in between now and then. We're ready to go on a drill program. We're just kind of waiting here for the timing of when we think we should start with the market. See the project, you got an international airport in Hermosillo. You take a paved highway to the local town of Corichico. From there, we're 30 minutes in on a gravel dirt road. This particular mountain range in eastern Sonora doesn't have a lot of modern exploration, and that's due to a lot of limited access. We have very good access where we are, but you go 100K to the south and you've got Dolores, which was Minefinder's flagship that they were bought for $1.5 billion by Pan American. They flew this whole range looking for another Dolores and settled on La Virginia being that lookalike. The only other modern operation in this particular trend was El Tigre, which is a past producing mine that you've got exploration happening again on now. But in between, there's no projects, there's no mines, and again, it's due to limited access. There's actually a major river that you can see more of it up by El Tigre there that runs north-south, and there's very few bridges over that river. So we happen to have one at that town in Corichico, very close by, but most of this range you would have to detour for hours and hours and hours, similar to what you have to do even at El Tigre, and go all the way up to the border and loop back around to get into the deposit. Where we are, we have a power line corridor that's just recently been put in, going right through the heart of the project that connects that town of Corichico to the next town on the road of Mesa Tres Rios. We have water year round. We don't deal with ejido on the claims here. It's just local ranches that we have agreements with. We've got overwhelming community support, and it's been a fantastic project to work and be part of. In the updated, we renegotiated this payment about 4 or 5 months ago, restructuring it to make sure it was more attractive in this bad market. We had a much larger cash outlay that was going to be due last June, what was going to be the final payment. But again, our partners on the project that were the local stakeholders on these claims, have been fantastic to work with. I can't thank them enough for, letting us renegotiate here twice now since we took over the project. And they've just, they want us to succeed and they want to work with us. And now they're, incentivized with shares to see the company succeed. They still have those small cash payments, or one final payment left of $200,000 US next June. But, they've been great to work with. Then those payments are on the claims in blue, which we can see the heart of El Rubi and where all the area where the historic work was done by Minefinders and Pan American. The red claims is we already own 100%, and we gave Pan American a 2% NSR project-wide to get access to all the historic data, all of their claims, everything that had been done. And that was, essential when we were first consolidating and bringing this project back together. won't spend too much time on that. Again, you just see some of the host regional geology in the area. This slide really kind of shows what this is the start of El Rubi looking from the south to the north. El Rubi, kind of beyond what you can see in this image, is a 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer flat plateau. Our high grade structure where we get our kilogram plus silver is this El Rubi structure. Then you get into the footwall of that structure and you get a 20 to 80 meter wide zone that runs at gram to gram and a half gold equivalent numbers. And then you step 100 meters to the west and you get into this western zone, and that's a 100 plus meter wide zone, again running those gram and a half gold equivalent type numbers. And that's strictly gold and silver. We have no base metals included in any of that. This andesite agglomerate has been our favorable horizon for those high grades and widths on our resource. There is still mineralization in those veins, and that structure continues on into the rhyolites, but it's a much tighter package. You don't get the big widths and as high grades in that package. And the big model moving forward that we want to test is the deeper contact, where this rhyolite will meet either with another andesite package or a limey sediment package. That contact where those fluids would have come up and hit that tight, dense rhyolite package, the fluids will have percolated along that contact. And we've always kind of known that there's something down deep. We get these chunks of sulfide mineralization that will pop up in, for a half meter here or there in our system. And you can see they've been blasted from depth on the structure. And that half meter will all of a sudden run with high grades of base metals along with high grades of gold and silver. And it was, Quentin Henning and Crescat, when they did their investment in the company, he really did a deep dive through our database and said, you're on to a gold carbonate base metal system, of which, like you said, we've very little base metals to speak of, but it'll come from that deeper contact, and the similar mines around the world have bonanza grades at that contact. So that's one of the things that we want to test in our next drill program is El Rubi at depth, and start to build an underground resource on El Rubi, and then continue to expand that open pit that we've developed at El Rubi. We'll also be stepping 2 to 3 kilometers to the east at El Molino and looking to make a new discovery there that, again, has this tightly spaced vertical breccia structures that are coming together. We've had some very nice sampling numbers at surface there, and are excited to potentially go over there and make a brand new discovery on the project. Again, I speak of some of those high grades, and you can see them here briefly in some of our drilling highlights. And it's that combination of that high grade structure that can be anywhere from 1 meter to 20 meters wide, combined with those really broad, long, lower grade zones that make that heap leach side of it work. And for those that don't know heap leach, the average open pit heap leach operation in the state of Sonora operates about a 0.5 gram gold average grade. Again, we're in our resource, when we get to that slide, you'll see we're at 0.9, 0.8, and just in the gold alone. And then we've got about another 0.5 gram gold equivalent of silver. And our metallurgy has been very good at recovering both. So really sets us apart from a lot of the other projects in the area. It's just, getting back into a market and getting, the project going again to the way that it deserves for what's already been found and where we're at on, on our model moving forward. Again, this was kind of one of our first hints, was this cross-section looking and why we're onto a bit of a different system than you traditionally see in Mexico. And that's that, sitting up high, you've got the high grade gold and silver at surface with no base metals. But then as you move 300 meters down, you're still hitting high grade gold and silver with no base metals. And that's not how the traditional system in Mexico works. We should see gold and silver almost falling off, and then gold, or the base metal numbers, copper, lead, zinc, really picking up and skyrocketing. And then on this section, you can see, right next to our 20 meter wide high grade breccia structure, we had 100 plus meter wide, 130 meter wide interval that was running, again, more than that average grade of what those open pit mines operate at. So that was a really special hole, but section by section, it's pretty consistent all the way through El Rubi. And so there's no reason it shouldn't continue to expand to the north and to the south. We've already expanded it 300 meters to the south from when we did the last resource. So again, there's already ounces that will be added to that resource from the work that's already been done. And then we'll just see how far we can take it north along that plateau as well. Again, one of the things that was unique about El Rubi versus a lot of the other projects in Mexico was seeing visible gold in the core. This image that looks like a moon with the gold on it is taken through a microscope. And again, you can see our gold sits there. It's not encapsulated or anything. It's sitting there alloyed as gold or electrum a combination of gold and silver. So again, we knew before we ever did any metallurgy that we were shouldn't have any issues on that front. And then when we did, we saw gold recoveries across, over 90% across the board, and then the silver even leaching well, and especially the low grade at 76%. So very good start on the metallurgy, and then you'll be able to vector that in and bring up both those numbers even further. There's the metallurgy slide. I guess I jumped the gun by one slide, but again, you can see the different kind of some of the various grade groups. But again, 90% recovery on the low grade gold with 76% recovery on the silver is very good. And again, that was the first pass, and you'll definitely be able to vector that in and get it up even further. Here's the resource that we already referenced. Again, you can see most of it is in that Rubi area. Again, 0.8 in the indicated, 0.9 in the inferred, plus another half-gram equivalent of silver on top of that. That, Rubi, because of that plateau, really allows you to start, have a few little starter pits on the steeper terrain that you have down in the area of Virginia and Las Huatas, where Pan American and mine finders are focused. And then you can kind of on the topography here see that more flat plateau deposit coming up the south side. So again, very favorable for an open pit. Gravity's your friend here, and you won't have much of a pit wall, if any, on the southern side of the pit. But as it continues to move north, we've got sampling that runs all the way to the north end of that plateau, where we see, gold, silver, and even some base metals picking up on the northern end of the plateau, and copper. So there's lots of potential for it to continue to run. El Molino, like I said, is our #1 exploration target right now. You can see that off to the east there of El Rubi. Again, very tightly spaced breccia structures in that area with really good sampling. So that's quickly become our geology's team #1 exploration target beyond El Rubi. And then we've also had a lot of success recently down in the El Oriental and Las Cantiles area, mapping and sampling and finding structures down there that were previously not known. And I know the team is anxious to get in, and it seems foolish that there wouldn't be another deposit like El Rubi, like Virginia, like Las Huatas in this, kind of 2 to 3 kilometer void where you don't have anything in the resource right now. We've put a couple shallow holes into Macho Libre in the past and hit some mineralization. We are definitely higher up in the system than we were at El Rubi, but there's definitely going to be another deposit sitting in that area right there. Again, you can see kind of our pit shells and a lot of the high grade that was not included because there wasn't enough tonnage outside of the pit in that Rubi area. And our geology team, again, has been working on making sure we get all of that high grade included in the next resource and changing some of the modeling and wireframes and other things. So again, excited for when we can come out with that new resource and see what that looks like. And then you see we lose a lot of the blocks in the historic area of Las Huatas and mine finders in this bottom part of the image here, just because of the topography. It doesn't make sense to expand the pits to include a lot of those blocks. That resource was also done at a much lower gold price than where we're at today. So again, I think could see our independent bumping up cutoffs and everything else as well, based on newer gold prices. Our plan this year is to do a 5,000 meter program that'll cover that El Rubi and El Molino area, both maybe one hole testing El Rubi at depth, but also really trying to fill in gaps and expand that resource, and then going over and doing 5, 6, 7 holes at El Molino as a reconnaissance program. And then once, if we make a discovery there, then just like we did El Rubi, systematically stepping out 50 meters at a time. We've continued to map and sample and cover a lot of the project that, tighten up our sampling lines. Again, a lot of the focus right now on that front has been down in this Macho Libre, Las Cantiles, El Oriental area, where they've, like I said, they've found a lot of new areas and targets that we're getting ready for drilling, on later campaigns. We've talked about that crest cap model, and this really kind of was the geophysics that we did on the back end of their investment, looking for something at depth that would light up, and we certainly found it. You can see this large deep target on that line 1000 sitting below El Rubi, which sits kind of up high from the surface down inside of that circle. So again, that was what Quentin Hennig wanted us to find and look for. And then it was also interesting is how we found some of these other blind structures that have very little sniffs at surface, but are potential targets down the road to test to see if there's parallel systems in between that Paradonis target, El Molino target, and where El Rubi sits. This is some of we did this airborne magnetic work before the Quentin Hennig model, and again, this large triangular shape kind of covers that area. And it's always been interesting to us that a lot of these prospects sit on the periphery of this large wedge triangle shape that you get, that's probably a buried intrusion underground, because you don't see that on surface or anything that would match those characteristics. Again, definitely a source of plumbing for mineralization, and why you see all these deposits on the periphery, both on the east and west of that kind of magnetic area there of resistance. So very interesting area. Just further speaking to, what you kind of got, we've got this system that runs north-south for hundreds of kilometers, and where we've got a vector in is where you get a flex in that structure, you get these blowouts, and where you get the best zones of mineralization. And then if you have an east-west running structure as well, that can certainly seems to enhance and provide another avenue for mineral activity, and you tend to get better grades where you have east-west structures running into your north-south structure. Skip through some of that. Again, these are just various levels of the sampling program, and based on different slides with gold, silver, kind of what lights up. Talked about El Oriental, La Original, these areas. This is El Molino to the east. You can see Perdona's up on that hill there. You can see these kind of structures that they've lit, where they're outcropping at surface and undercover where you can't see them. And again, very nice surface sampling for this project. You don't see a lot of really high grades, even at El Rubi at surface. You tend to get moved down and get to a favorable horizon where you really get the big grades. Yeah, you can see where our camp's located. Macho Libre, this is taken from over El Rubi, looking back south towards everything. And again, you can see how it's more mountainous there, but behind the image is where you get that flat plateau. Already talked about updating the resource, targeting some of these isolated higher grade blocks that were outside of the pit. And like I said, we have a pretty good handle on how we're going to do that. And then also, again, you can see that deep target lighting up on that line 1000 relative to where all of our drilling has been to date. We'll wrap it up and point out what we've done since we existed as a company for decades, but ESG has become a bigger and bigger deal. And we do, we're a small exploration company, and we understand that. So we don't have the budgets that the major miners do, but it's always been important for us to do everything we can, whether that's forcing our drilling companies and putting pressure on them to make sure they've got, the most up-to-date technology, recycling water, doing what they can on that front, planting trees, planting crops, whatever we can in the area to make our camp more sustainable. Recycling, composting, doing what we can there, helping the local community, donating various things to, work with our, because the communities are our partner, and we're trying to, come in and, they overwhelmingly support us as a mining company. They would love for us to find a mine, and because they understand the jobs that would bring to that community. And most of our local workforce comes from those kind of 2-3 communities in the surrounding area. And then some of our more advanced geologists come from Hermosillo. But again, we've, been part of helping support the churches, supporting schools, the sports programs. During COVID, we were providing medicine and extra medical support. Any way we can work with our local partners is very important, and has always been part of any, company within the Belcara group. We were just recently, there was a very small forest fire about 2 kilometers from the camp, and our team stepped in and fought the fire and put it out on their own. In the area, even before the local community could get there, but stepping in, and this has happened multiple times, over the last few years, where, we're there, we're using our equipment, making sure if we have to bulldoze in or do anything on those fronts, like, we're there to help and work with those communities. And oftentimes, before that, they're grateful, and, they've improved our roads at times, without us having to spend on it, to work with the local farmers. It's just been a really good relationship back and forth between everyone. We're big on not having accidents. We've lots of training goes on in our camp, and we've been blessed since we took over here. I mean, I think the worst thing that's happened here or there is a cut or someone fell and scraped. We have never had a major incident on the project. And with that, I think it'd be great to open up for questions, and thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Steve. Great presentation, as always. So now we'll turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar, and just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So that said, maybe let's just start off in terms of, you talked a little bit about future drilling targets and kind of where those would be focused. So ahead of kind of that refreshed resource update, is that kind of something that would come after one more round of drilling, or would you envision multiple rounds or bigger program for that?
No, I think that we do it after that 5,000 meter program when we get that done. The only thing that I guess if we made like a massive discovery per se at El Molino, and we wanted to we might add a program to follow up on that to push it to include it in a resource. But no, we definitely want to get a new resource out next year, and like I said, the majority of it comes from El Rubi, and we've our database manager who's amazing. We never really figure out what her proper title will be. We just know that she's overqualified to work in our group, but she's worked and looked at every which way she can, and definitely proposed a number of holes at El Rubi that would certainly add ounces with a lot of confidence. And then testing, and I guess the other one would be the deeper hit at if we push through and hit deep on that contact, would we want to wait on a resource to prove up a bit more of an underground idea? So I mean, we have to be fluid with based on results, but the plan would be on the back end of that 5,000 meter program to update the resource.
Right, and that program would kind of be a split, just clarifying it, between El Rubi and then testing El Molino, and if you get something interesting there, that might change things as well.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Okay, and then let's see here. In terms of looking kind of at the target areas, have you got a good handle kind of on the distribution between the gold and the silver, and kind of where base metals are located on the property package, or is that still something that you're kind of synthesizing?
I mean, there's lots more exploration that could be done around the project to test other targets. We've got La Gloria that sits in that same north-south trend, another 3-4 kilometers north of El Rubi, at least, maybe even for a couple kilometers more than that. But that's a 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer zone that looks like a big porphyry potential. But it sits in that same regional trend, has a major east-west trend running through it. But there you'd probably be talking about 1,000 meter long plus holes to test the porphyry, which definitely, especially in this market, is not on our radar, but it never really has been something we've really wanted to do. But I would expect there, obviously, given that it's a porphyry target, that you would pick up on base metals a lot in that. I know from some of the shallow sampling in that, we saw a lot of poly and other things in that area. Northern part of that plateau, we definitely see some more copper in with our sampling and the few of the shallow holes we put on the northern end of the El Rubi, 2K north of where the resource is. So there's some there. But no, it's really been, even in the historic area, mostly gold and silver, very, anomalous base metals up high in the system where we are here. And that's always been different. So I think you're going to see the base metals pick up when that discovery is made at depth of where, the root of the system is, because we see that 19 meter wide zone that was our best intercept at El Rubi. It was only a half meter of that towards the bottom of that had those chunky sulfide materials in it that ran with the base metals. But both sides of the intercept, half meter either way, still had high grade gold and silver, but there was, the base metals disappeared because you got out of it, just didn't have those chunks of sulfide. And that's been kind of, we know those are down at depth, and it's just figuring out where they come from. But kind of on average across the project, it's about 60% gold, 40% silver, and very little base metals to date.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting. And I think right now, kind of as you mentioned, in this market, it's doing all that work, kind of exploring the broader package for new zones and potential down the road. Just really highlights the scale of this project, and already having those known zones are ripe for expansion as well. So that's great to see. So right now, I guess maybe let's just chat about the silver market in general. You mentioned that at the beginning. Maybe just dive into that, and let's get your take on what we're seeing there right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can look historically, and obviously we all know what silver's been at in the past. I think this cycle is very different than what we've seen, the past 2 times when silver hit $50 an ounce. in that all of a sudden now we have this large industrial use of silver that's also affecting the supply side of the metal, where we've operated at a deficit now the last few years. So I mean, I get that side of it, I think, has silver even more loaded to move up as we move forward, while it still also has, you know, the monetary side that tie with gold and being a hedge against currency. I just think, I mean, I mentioned it briefly at the beginning too. I think it all really boils down to interest rates right now. That's what our sector, or what people are waiting for, is they want to know that the Fed is done raising rates, or at least see a sure sign that, you know, and then getting to rate cuts again. And as that happens, I think our whole industry is going to, you know, skyrocket. And I mean, every time we have one of these horrid markets that lasts for too long and is extra nasty, gold and silver stocks are the first ones to rebound coming out of it. We saw it at the beginning of COVID when we had the massive sell-off. 2 months later, companies were back to all-time highs. We saw it in you know, coming out of 2012, and that big pull-off in metals prices. 2013, you know, stocks went from, or 2012, stocks went from, you know, $3 a share, you know, Oracle silver, if we're going to go back to our past, you know, history, and then down to 20, 30 cents, and then ultimately sold, you know, less than a year later for $3 a share. And it was nothing changed on the drilling or changed on the company. It was just, that's what happens to these explorers when we get into these bad markets. People flee to cash, they sell anything paper. And when you've got, for the most part, junior mining companies that are fairly illiquid relative to other investments, it doesn't take a lot of selling pressure, and these stocks get smoked. But by the same token, when the buying picks up and you don't have a lot of sellers, these stocks run very fast. So, I mean, you could probably invest in almost any junior out there, and you're going to do well if you can be patient and hold on. And as long as the junior survives, you know, and doesn't go bankrupt in the interim. But the companies like ours, I mean, I would say Barcella and Silver Viper are off right now with the resources that you have there, and looking at what stocks are trading at. It's pretty hard to go wrong. It's just being patient and waiting, and we're all, you know, again, and when you're looking at our group, obviously you can see our ownership and what we buy and in the market, and our interests are aligned with shareholders. I mean, we felt the pain in our portfolios watching the value of these stocks go down as well, and certainly continue to believe that ultimately we're going to come out of this very poor market, this bear market that we're in right now, and we're going to do really well as we come out of it. And it's the quality companies that are going to survive. So again, I would, you know, and again, I would think most of the people that are on this call know the sector and are well aware, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, but I think we're on the verge of coming out of it now. And at these prices, it's very difficult to miss and not make a lot of money if you can be patient.
Right. And okay. And then, you know, I guess, what are your thoughts in terms of, you know, silver obviously has a green energy industrial uses as well. You know, do you expect that at all to help kind of spur demand for the metal going forward, and, you know, by relation kind of help silver equities? Or, you know, is that something that's kind of being met by byproduct production and might not move the needle?
No, I mean, we've seen the last, even where we're at right now with the green movement. So I mean, the industrial side of silver now, between the solar and cars and the infrastructure needed to support all of that, I mean, we're just scratching the surface of what these various governments around the world are trying to, you know, eliminate the use of fossil fuels and gas-powered vehicles and move more and more to electric. And every year, as more and more of the percentage is on, you know, those, you know, going to electric, you need more silver, and you need a lot more of it, and it's not there. You know, we've seen supply out, or demand outperforming the supply. We've seen the surplus of silver that exists in the world. That number has been going down year by year, and as, you know, exponentially using it more and more, and these car companies are lining up to, you know, get more and more of not only silver, but, you know, copper, zinc, cobalt, nickel, all the different parts that are needed for these various components. And the supply is not there, and it takes a long time to bring projects online and get them into production. So meanwhile, you've got, you know, on top of that, you can go politically into the mix of how it even probably sets it up for an even further jump. And that's, you know, you go into the Chile. So you mentioned byproduct. Well, Chile's nationalizing mines and mining, and that's a big part. Peru is right there along with Chile, ready, you know, at any point to do that under a regime. And that's, you know, number 2 silver producer in the world. So as that happens in these traditional markets or traditional jurisdictions where a lot of that silver supply comes from, especially as a byproduct, you're not going to get it, and you're not going to get new exploration and new projects opening there. So as those mines, you know, run out of resources or reserves, and you've got a demand that's already you know, amplifying and going up year by year, the only way that you're going to get new supply is silver price running a ton. And then you start to bring on assets that were, you know, deemed not economic at 20, 25, 30, but maybe they work at 50. Maybe it takes a project to 75. Who knows, you know, various projects around the world. And that's where you're going to have to go to get some of the silver supply. And I don't even think then you're going to be able to match the demand. But, you know, that's the first step, is these mining, but you need metals prices to be at a point where the mining companies know they're going to make money doing it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, you know, maybe let's just turn to Mexico kind of as a jurisdiction. I know that's been kind of in the news over the last little while. They do have the election coming up. I guess, what's your viewpoint from being on the ground there, and what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, AMLO's whole regime, he's publicly, you know, he has a certain group of supporters, and he publicly makes statements that, you know, frankly, don't look very good on the mining industry, because, you know, some of the stuff he's said and done. But for the most part, it hasn't really changed a ton, especially for us as explorers. I mean, we just, you know, as part of getting ready for this drilling program, got our drilling permits in place. We went through that process very smoothly, you know, all of our environmental, everything. We're permitted to pretty much drill wherever we want on the project. We, you know, proposed a bunch of different paths, and they were all approved across the project for 5 years on those permits. And that was, you know, again, nothing's really changed. The state governments, you know, Sonora is the #1 gold producing state in Mexico, and the state governments are really the drivers along a lot of the rules anyways. And again, our Sonora state government is highly supportive of mining. It's the #1 industry in the state. And then as far as the election goes, I mean, AMLO can't run again unless somehow something really dramatically changes here and he changes, you know, the constitution. But both parties right now that are kind of flagged, that would be like coalition groups of various government parties coming together, you know, the general sentiment is both would be much better for mining than what the AMLO group, you know, regime has been under. So I think there's a lot of optimism amongst the mining companies and the explorers and all of us that are operating down in Mexico that, you know, come June, when that election happens next year, that it's definitely going to be a move in the right direction for our group. But even if, you know, AMLO somehow was still in for another term, or someone, you know, very close to him, it's never been a sector that you really mess with. And, you know, he's had his full term there and hasn't really changed a ton on the mining side. You know, the one thing they have done is they've made it so you can't stake new claims, and that's been like that for years. And that's just trying to get caught up on the backlog of all the paperwork that they're still not caught up on, because everything works very slow and it's not digital in Mexico like it is in Canada and the US. So, I mean, there's certain things that he has definitely slowed down with the people he's put in various local offices, but in general, I mean, it's still exploration. Our costs are still relatively the same. Not much has really changed, and I think it's just going to get better moving forward as we come out of their government group and get into a new one.
Yeah, it's good to hear. That's kind of similar to what other groups we've spoken to are saying as well from the ground. So that's excellent to hear that you know, change could be afoot. Okay, so, you know, maybe just in terms before we wrap up here, you know, I guess where's the treasury at now, and what do you have runway for going forward, and what's the outlook?
Yeah, I mean, if we're not drilling, we can definitely, you know, tighten up and run and go months without having to raise capital or do anything. We're down just under $1 million in cash in the till right now. You know, obviously, if we're going to do a program, we'd want to shore that up a bit at some point. But, you know, given, like you said, where the market's at right now, we're not racing to do a financing unnecessarily at low share prices, and we'll be patient and pick the right timing when it makes sense to fire up a drill program and do a raise and you know, really ramp up again.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll put out a final call for questions, but maybe if you just want to kind of give the final pitch or, you know, catalyst coming up for investors, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, like you said, you've got an opportunity right now to invest in prices and an asset that's already proven itself to be very good, has lots of room for expansion, lots of room for new discoveries, which certainly in a good market or even any market, when you're making new discoveries, you tend to see your share price and there tends to be large jumps on that. So we've got new resource potential growing on that, new discoveries, news flow, investing in a price point that's lower than the company's ever been, and that's just, like I said, the market conditions that we're in right now. So I think it's a very easy time to make an investment and make a lot of money, you know, in this space. And again, I would encourage people not just to do it in our company. There's a lot of companies in the same boat, but there's not a lot of companies that can say, you know, they're double, triple the average grade of the existing operations in the state that have been proven and shown that they're economic all the way through the various price points. It's nice that we have exposure to both gold and silver. We're not hung up on waiting for silver to make that big run. And like I said, we're about 60% gold. So the gold companies, unlike the silver companies, have been making a lot of money here over the last few years. We'd be of interest to both a gold major and a silver major. And that's, you know, our end win is, I think, you know, when we come out with a new resource, possibly do some sort of you know, maybe one more, but another drilling program after that new resource, and then maybe do a PEA or something on the back end of that. But at any point, our company is highly attractive, I think, as a takeover candidate for whether it's one of the major mining companies or one of the mid-tier companies. It's definitely an attractive asset and an attractive jurisdiction, and I think it's a steal right now at these prices.
Perfect. All right, so I don't see any other questions that have come in, so I'll leave it there, and would like to thank Steve from Silver Viper for taking the time to host the webinar today with Red Cloud Securities, and thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Taylor.